Good morning. Good morning to all the delegates of SDC 2022, the flagship conference of the Premier Association SNIA. SNIA and SDC are very dear to me. For more than 20 years, Mr. Rahul Gupta has been educating me on this conference and the events, and for many years my good friend Mr. Sanjay Agarwal also has been doing the same. So good to see both of them, and thank you both for inviting me. The fact that I bring to you is several decades of looking at storage, and let me start with a simple story. I still remember in early 2004 or 5, one of our students' father was talking to me. He himself is an IT professional. He was trying to request me that I should convince his daughter that she should take up a job with Infosys and not with EMC. EMC had just entered India. It was just about 10 times the size of Infosys, but even as an IT professional, my student's father did not know about the EMC. When I told him that EMC can eat Infosys for a lunch, he was quite surprised. And of course, she did join. She has been doing extremely well. She is a noted storage industry professional today. But what is important for you to realize is, for most of the college students particularly when they are entering the workforce, for many other areas and many other companies, they could relate to some course. You know, if you are joining an Oracle or a Microsoft in the area of database, you would have actually done a database course. So if you are joining Cisco, you would have done a networking course. If you are doing an operating systems course, then you can actually relate to companies, whether it could be Red Hat or Microsoft or even Google, right? But networks are generally not taught, and that is one of the difficulties people have. And I think that is something which I have been kind of requesting SNIA. SNIA has been doing a great job. I think now at least some of the networking courses are becoming elective courses in institutes. That is good. But what I will do today is very simple, because all of you are professionals, and the old man around, what I can take is I can take some liberty with you and kind of push you into the next era or the next stage of networking. Networking professionals, I feel, have a much larger social responsibility, and this is my appeal to you to look at the larger social responsibility and play your role. So it is a very short 5 key points, what I call, these are the 5 points. I will spend about 4 minutes each so that we get about 20 plus minutes, okay. The first one is what I call SSN is 1. Of course, those of you in United States, SSN expands to social security number, but in this context it is storage, servers and network. They are all kind of seamlessly integrated. I also will spend some time talking about what I call smart storage. How do we move from ordinary storage to smart storage? And then probably much more important is what I call sustainable storage. Sustainability will be the key in the next 2 decades. You all would have seen that, you know, already the planet is actually seeing the global warming is real, right? Sometimes Chicago has a temperature which resembles more like Chennai, and Chennai has temperature sometimes which resembles more like Shimla. So these kind of things are happening, right, already. So what does it mean? I think it is important, and there is every professional, storage professional is no exception, also has to look at sustainability. And then there is an emerging area that is coming, particularly in the last 2.5 years, the whole world has seen COVID-19. So health data and life data, your vaccination data, etc., are becoming increasingly important. And then with this COVID-19 or the post-COVID-19 era, where everything is done from home, work from home kind of a stuff, so storage gets an added dimension. I will spend a few minutes on that. And finally, my pet idea, what is called the carrier content and control, and how does it reflect to the storage, is something I will spend time. So, this is how the next 20 minutes will go. Let me start with the first one. The server, the storage and network in some sense seamlessly merge in the sense that as far as the end users are concerned, they do not really have to really look at it one way or other, because collectively what gets delivered is data. And we all know we live in this data dominated world, the data analytics world, the data science world, the AI/ML world, where everything is data, right. So, what is important is the data has to be processed in some server, and that server actually has to retrieve it from storage, and the actual retrieval from the storage to server happens through a network. Historically, while we all entered computing in 60s, so we used to study them in isolation, and to some extent even today I think some of the courses, the way they are taught in isolated way. I think it is high time we look at it in an integrated way. One area where we actually in India, I will use an Indian example so that you can relate to. So, we have an exam called JEE, which is a joint entrance exam. These are conducted by IITs, many of us who have been part of the IIT system for decades. So, we take pride, we do it with enormous amount of preparation, and this is one of the exceptionally well run examination in the country. So, but what happens is about 1.5 million students take this exam, and because it is so important in the career decision of a student moving from a school to a college, there is a phenomenal amount of social involvement. As the joke goes, there is one student who takes the exam, but there are 10 more people who are actually preparing for this. This could be the siblings, this could be the parents, this could even be the grandparents. So, all of them are tensed on the particular day at 5 p.m. when the results are out, between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. So, some 10 million to 100 million people are actually looking up for the results. And then for a couple of years we used to have the problem, the servers will crash, etc. Thanks to SSD, so things changed completely, because this is primarily a lookup algorithm, right. All that people do is looking up, so there is hardly any processing. So, because of lookup algorithm, so essentially put it in SSD, and then we did not have too much of a crash issue. But this is one area where you find the end users want the results. This is my roll number, what is my rank, did I make it, okay. So, is it a compute function? Obviously yes, because there is a lookup that happens. Is it a storage function? Obviously yes, it comes from a significant amount, because there are millions of students who have taken the exam and you have to correctly serve it. And obviously it is a network function, because you could be viewing it, watching it from anywhere in the country. Why this country? Because there are lots of people who also have their grandparents or maybe uncles and aunties in other parts of the country, but everyone gets involved and people could be traveling. So, I think what happens is the SSN is one. I actually gave this talk in 2011 in one of the HP event. I think Sanjay Agarwal had invited me again, he was a part of HP at that time. So, I think this is kind of coming back again and again, this SSN is one. And I keep reminding my students, today non-network storage is no storage, okay. And I think cloud computing is real, right. We used to talk of cloud computing. Today I think people do not even talk of cloud computing. Computing is cloud, right. So, the storage is networks. So, let me shift the gears to the second part of it, smartness. I think, smartness, smart word is sometimes overused. We talk of smart cities, etc., etc. But I think in the AI ML data dominated world, everything has to get smart, and one has to define, one has to refine, one has to kind of tweak the idea of a smartness. See, one of the things which we storage professionals together can take credit is something called CDN. We had made CDN a reality, okay, content data network. And my good friend Professor John at MIT, who runs this interesting company called Akamai, right? Akamai is simply amazing, right? Particularly when you are watching things like IPL cricket, or watching Olympic games, or watching the US or the Indian election results, etc. These are the times you realize that the storage is so smart, things are distributed across. So, when you are actually sitting in some part of the world, Timbuktu, and accessing it, you do not even know where it is coming from. And there is a whole range of smart things that happen. So, things are copied smartly, smart copies are kept, redundant copies are kept, they are removed, they are synchronized, they are made consistent. All these things happen with a precision of a clockwork, but the user does not have to know. All that you do is you go and type google.com, microsoft.com, IPL.com. So, the magic happens behind, but if you really look at it, what is it? It is locational smartness. It anticipates that this is what would be the data needed in this part of the world, and a copy is kept so that I can serve much faster. People do not have to wait for seconds, but in milliseconds, the user is actually served the page which he or she is looking for. Okay? This smartness has made storage so interesting. And of course, there are also other forms of smartness. I just took one example of a CDN. The other is, my pet example is, look at net banking. At least in this country, net banking is real for the last 15 years. So, people do not go to bank, most of the time they only go to the net. And sometimes you want some old data, particularly many of you would remember last week was the last week for filing of the income tax. That is the time where you actually need the full data of the last full year of the banking transactions. You might have 5 accounts, 6 accounts, 3 accounts in 2 different banks, or maybe 3 different banks, and you actually have to have the full 1 year data, or sometimes if you are having something spilling over, maybe 2 year data. So, what the banks do is that last 1 or 2 months data, you will find you will use one option, and beyond 2 months or beyond 6 months you will use other option. And this is what people think it is an option, but you as a storage professionals know it is actually layered storage. Okay? And you realize that people generally are forgiving. People do not mind waiting for a few seconds to get 1 year old data, but people want the last 2 months data to be immediately served to them. So, this is layered storage. So, we use smart storage in so many ways. I think we need to kind of make these things as what I call standard offering. Sustainable storage is something that is very dear to me, and my request to all of you, the storage professional with folded hands, that you have a very special responsibility. You store the data of everyone. It could be President of United States, it could be, on another extreme case, it could be a criminal somewhere in a jail, right? You have such a varied types of data, varied levels of people, and you have health data, banking data, the fintech data, the data about the taxes. So many data are actually getting stored, and as per my previous slide, because they are stored, they are networked, they are served, all these things happen like a black magic. So, what is important is that how do we ensure that sustainability is built in. You might think that, look, I am just using a pen drive, but remember, when 7 billion people use 10 pen drives per person, you are really talking of a very large number of them, and you have to worry about them physical disposal. You also have to worry about the data disposal, who is authorized to dispose, who is authorized to delete, who is authorized to remove, who is authorized to access, etc. So, my own personal feeling is this will be extremely important in the next 2 decades. And remember, when sustainability development goals, the so called SDGs, were announced by United Nations, I think most professional, particularly storage professionals like you and me, we thought that this is for United Nations, this is for heads of state, this is for governments, this is for public policy, etc. But I think as the years are rolling, as we see increasingly our own role in the larger scheme of things, SDG is for everybody. Every organization, I think every board will have to really look at aligning their organizational goals with SDG goals. Every industry, particularly the networking and storage industry, also has to align itself with the SDG. How do we ensure that we are doing things which are sustainable? Take a very simple example. I am using one example. Because of my age, I end up advising lots of senior citizens, lots of your uncles and aunties. So, they are all using WhatsApp, and WhatsApp storage goes on increasing. So, nobody wants to delete. So, what happens is, I think their own children and grandchildren are generally happy for their father or a grandpa or a grandma. Every year they get a new phone, and they get a phone with a larger and a larger capacity. So, somehow they are sustaining. But at some point in time it may not be sustainable, because the rate at which they would have had a 64 GB, next year they have 128, next year they will have 256, because it generally grows in 2s and 3s. But the storage which they end up doing, there is much more of videos, much more of shared pictures and thousands of pictures, hundreds of pictures, the grandchildren graduation day at MIT, so there are 1,000 pictures. So, all those things they want to store. So, I think at some point in time they will have to take a decision of removing a few things, and the earlier they get into this habit, the better it is, because otherwise it becomes larger and larger. You all know that in an office, if you have a too large a pile of paper, the very size of it puts you off, you never get to clear it. Okay. So, somewhere along, I think too much of quote unquote information that can be deleted does not get deleted, and I think over a period of time, it is also another form of garbage, right. So, I think one needs to really look at some of these things. Okay. So, look at sustainable storage both from a physical point of view as well as a data point of view. I will talk about other forms including health data in the next slide. Okay. So, this is again something in the post COVID time, I think all of us have become much more conscious. So, what is happening is we do two things. One is we are starting to store things for life, right. So, in a sense, like even the income tax department, they actually keep the data for the last 15-20 years online. So, what is happening is you are probably until the life of a person, lot of financial data and school data, all your degree certificates, they are all available in a dematerial form, and stocks are dematerialized. So, lots and lots of data are actually going to be stored online all your life. Okay. Now comes an interesting stuff. So, what are the implications of data privacy? In this country we have passed the data privacy laws. Europe has a fairly mature kind of data privacy law that every country is getting on to it. But I think what is happening is that at this point in time, we the storage professionals are not doing a great job. We need to engage with a variety of customers and make them understand what does it mean to every individual. You as an individual, you as an office worker, you as a parent, you as a citizen, you as a CEO, you as a professional, in so many dimensions you have to really look at data privacy. And I think right now we are looking at it as a compliance orientation. Whenever you have compliance, you have some legal officer in charge. As long as he or she nods the head, everybody is not the head. Okay? But I think we have to relook at the whole thing. So can we really look at moving away from the compliance orientation to enabling the ecosystem? Let me repeat, enabling the ecosystem. And how do we kind of come to terms with that? And I will take one special example of health data. Once again, in the last 2 years, partly due to COVID and partly because of other reasons, Ayushman Bharat became big. This is a large insurance scheme as well as a health scheme rolled out by Government of India, and literally hundreds of million people are eligible for it. They are benefiting from it. Now comes the interesting stuff. I am a patient. I go to a doctor. The doctor recommends that I go to a particular lab and get all the data. I go back to the doctor and the doctor says maybe something is not good. That is the time you realize that maybe you take a second opinion. But when you want to take the second opinion, sometimes the data is not available to you. You need the permission from the doctor, or sometimes you need the help from the lab. But that is the time you find that people who are generally kind of nice to you suddenly kind of turn slightly different. They say, no, this is our data. So I think one has to be very careful who owns the data. Technically you own the data, but what happens is that the data is captured by different people. Sometimes they don't cooperate with you, and sometimes the doctor may not be very happy with you taking the second opinion. So they might use this as a kind of putting a little deceleration so that you don't go. Okay? But I think these things must be addressed, and I think collectively as a society we need to have a way by which data is freely moved around, and the ownership of data and the transferring of the data etc. are done in a more professional way. Right now it is all the kind of deal, the kind of relationship I have with the doctor, with the lab etc. Some of these things should probably change. Okay? So I think data regarding health possibly must be viewed very differently from data relating to maybe a financial data. Okay? And of course, there are special privacy related stuff, particularly if you have certain kinds of diseases etc. It is not something which you feel happy about others knowing it. So how do we ensure that it is not only that people do not have access to data, people should not even know that this is there. One thing is to have access to data, other one is not even know that such a data exists. So it is very kind of subtle, and I think this is something which we need to come to terms with. The next slide is my pet slide again. This is something which I have been kind of using in multiple forums because generally people like it, so I kind of reuse this. This is what we call carrier, content and control, and the value shift that happens from the carrier to the content to the control as the industry matures. It so happens that it applies to a very large number of industries. So the example which I start with is the railroad industry of the earlier 20th century, noticeably in the west coast of United States, the so called Californian gold rush. So a lot of workers from all over the planet going to California in search of jobs, because a lot of so called the railroad barons were building rails and lots of jobs were there. So it was perceived that there is a golden opportunity in making the railroads. Okay, obviously it was there for about 20-30 years, but after some time you did not hear about these big guns who made the railroad, because what happened was the value started shifting from making the railroads to actually running the trains. Okay? So from the carrier the value shifted to the content. And even there is a subtle variation, because what happens is, it is one thing to move coal and steel, it is another thing to move people. So when you go from commodity movement to people movement, you obviously have more sophisticated offerings, and because the sophisticated offerings, you could sell it at a much higher price. So obviously you had the Amtraks of the world, etc., etc. And then further shift happened. It is not sufficient to move the trains, you need to have signaling. The signaling system got to be far more sophisticated. That is the one which enabled that you can actually have high speed trains without having too many accidents. Safe high speed trains were made possible by the signaling system. So, and then of course you need to have standards, you need to have rail safety, and then you have a government having rail safety organizations. So the shift happened from content to the control, that is safety, regulations, etc., etc. So what you find is, it is not that carrier and content goes away, but the relative importance, the relative proportion of importance across the carrier and the content actually starts shifting. Take the airlines. So one set of fellows made the airports, they made so much money, but the people who made much more money are the people who made the airplanes, the Boeings and the Airbus. But even they are able to do only so much, okay, because they are only making the planes. The people who are actually making use of the planes happen to be the airlines. So again, shift of value from carrier to content. And little later, you all know FAA, Federal Aviation Organization, right? They decide the safety, etc., etc. So the safety becomes much more important, the standards become much more important, and of course the associated patents, etc. Pharma example, right? Particularly in the COVID-19, you all see that, right? So people who actually could make those molecules, people who could make those drugs, are able to kind of get much larger value. So it is in some sense a control, right? So people who make and manufacture and logistics, they make some amount of money. So there is the carrier and the content, but the control, the patents, the intellectual property, okay. If you take it to IT industry, to some extent, you know, IBM and HP, you know, at least in our time, they were the big guns, right? For 40 years, they were the big guns. But you know, they are big, but you know, they are no longer the people who call the shots, because they were still the carriers, right? The shift happened to the content industry, which is initially software industry, the Microsofts of the world, Oracles of the world. Then it happened to the still further shift to the other content, which is now the data, the Googles of the world, Amazons of the world, the Facebooks of the world, okay. So once again, you find that there is a nice shift of value from carrier, content and control. So my appeal to you as storage professionals, do factor in this, okay. So you know, if storage, for a lot of time you essentially look at storage as so much of gigabytes and terabytes, etc., okay. That is still the carrier view, but what you store is going to be far more important. So the content, particularly when you are talking of data like health, it is going to be far more important. And of course your ability to kind of guarantee that it is safe from a privacy point of view, it is safe from availability point of view, it is secure, that it does not go to the wrong hands, etc. So those subtle things which are part of the control are going to be far more valuable than the mere storage, okay. So let me come to the last slide. Storage is much deeper. I think that is what I want you to really, I generally call it storage industry is the infra for the infra. See, already IT industry is the infra for other industries, but I think across the IT industry segments, storage is going to be the key infrastructure. So you are the bedrock on which everybody is able to dance. So obviously you must be far more secure, far more stronger, far more stable than all others. And as the joke goes, every industry contributes to storage, right? Some Amazon fellow is checking out something, big basket is delivering something, all these things lead to some storage. A bank is doing a transaction, it is going to storage. Income tax department is collecting tax, it is leading to storage, right? So every industry contributes to storage, and this is my pushing you hard. Sorry for being an old man, so I can take some liberty with you. Do we, I am including me also into you, as storage professionals, appreciate this new responsibility? This is a new responsibility on us. We need to protect the data for everybody. We need to make it affordable. We need to make it accessible. We have to make it always on. And we need to ensure the sanctity is maintained. I don't mess up the data. I don't mix up the data. Okay. And also I need to ensure that, I think now we should start planning for the life. I am sure that, X number of years from now when I am dead, so I think there must be a way by which I don't leave my digital debris behind. How do we ensure that the digital debris which I have, see, after my life it becomes debris, right? So there should be a mechanism by which things get automatically removed. Okay. At the same time, it should happen for some reason. If the children, grandchildren decide to have some parts of it as a heritage, they should probably get access to it. Okay. Once again, there must be a way by which we do it, and this is something which must be available for every one of the 8 billion people on this planet. Some people may be poor, some people may be rich, some of us are technically savvy, some people may not be technically savvy, but irrespective of their background, economic, social, technical, tech savviness, so there should be a mechanism of kind of taking the data, making it available as long as it is needed, and automatically kind of removing them. So this new responsibility is something which I am sure you are aware of it, but I thought that this is something which I should kind of pose it on to you, and wishing you good luck. So next 20-30 years is going to be exciting time for the storage professionals. I am sure the SDC conferences will become far more important conference, far more conferences that get much more attention, and I am sure that new products etc. will keep coming. So I will keep looking at you from a distance, taking my notes, and once in a while coming back to you and sharing your views. Okay. So thank you SDC 22, thank you networking professionals for having me. I do hope that I made some sense. As I said earlier, I keep myself at a distance and look at the larger issues, and my own request to all of you is that even without probably you realizing, you are having an extremely important, extremely valuable position in life, in the sense that you are custodians of data for the entire planet, custodians of so many kinds of data, including financial, health, transport, tax, etc., individual level, organizational level, and the government level. Be aware of this responsibility, and I am sure you will perform exceedingly well in the next 20-30 years. You will be an important element of this planet and play your job responsibly. Thank you and wishing you good luck.